Hello, and welcome to Android for Work Live. I'm Sebastian Scheider, and I'm excited to be part of the team bringing the best of Android to business. Android is the world's most popular OS because of its open approach that fosters innovation and creates an incredible diversity of choices. Android for Work brings together a vast ecosystem of device makers, app providers, and management solutions, and delivers a secure, flexible mobility platform built for the enterprise. Today's sessions will cover everything from ease of management to range of customization. But before we go any further, I'd like to introduce Android for Work Product Director, Andrew Toy. Andrew's here to share more on how we see the Android mobility vision as a transformational catalyst for today's business. Andrew, come on up. Good to see you.
Thanks, Sebastian. And thank you to everybody out there watching today. We're so excited to share with you our vision for where the workplace is going and what we're doing with Android for Work to transform businesses and transform the way we all do business and bring into the workplace of tomorrow. If you think about what you did 10 years ago in your personal life, before you had a smartphone. I know it's hard, but think back to before you had a smartphone and think about what you did, how you lived your life, how you went to the movies, how you ordered food, how you went out and bought things. And you think about how you do those things today with your smartphone. I think you'll feel that your life really has been transformed. I think you almost feel like, well, how did we even do things back then? It's that different. And if you think about what was the workplace like 10 years ago, and then you think about what is it like today, I think you'll think, well, yeah, it's changed. It's definitely changed. But has it transformed? And I think that we would all agree that the workplace really hasn't transformed. And that is the word I want everyone to take away today. Transformation. How do we go forward? All of us. Google will be part of it. Our device partners will be part of it. Android will be part of it. All of you will be part of it. How do we transform our businesses, transform our organizations, our institutions, and bring them forward into that world of tomorrow? We want 10 years from now us to look back and say, wow, how did we get anything done? And before we really changed everything with mobility. And transformation is really what we should all be aiming for. That's the bar. The bar is not change. The bar is not incremental improvement. The bar is transformation. Stock price changing transformation, right? We want to change the top line and the bottom line. We want to set the bar so high that every single employee is mobilized, every single workflow is mobilized, and mobility simply permeates the workplace. It just should simply be everywhere. And that is what we are going for. And that is why Android for Work exists. Because by changing businesses, by changing the way that we all get stuff done, we think new products will come about. We think that new efficiencies will come about, bring new price points to the market. We'll change those markets. We'll expand those markets. And the world itself will transform. Because the world is driven by business. So by transforming business, we will transform the world. That's the bar. So what does that mean, and how are we doing that with Android? There are three really important things, and this is the way we think about it here at Google, is we provide, and we want to provide with Android, a really strong foundation for your mobility strategy. We want to make sure that that strategy is tremendously impactful, that you make that big difference, that stock price changing difference, that valuation changing difference. And we want to make sure that you have a tremendous amount of choice when you do those things, that you're not locked into one system, locked into one platform. Choice is incredibly important to the way we operate and the way we think. So what do we mean by a strong foundation? Android for Work is built into many different areas, and you'll hear more about that in a moment. But what we really feel is that it needs to provide a sense of confidence and breadth so that underlying every Android device, underlying every single mobility service we provide from Google is this concept of management, the concept of security, and the concept of flexibility. We provide a lot of our capabilities through APIs. We don't prescriptively go and say, well, this is the way you're going to use it, or that's the way you're going to use it. What we do is we provide APIs to customers and to ecosystem partners. APIs that can be utilized, that can be extended, that can be mixed and matched to provide different kinds of capabilities. And that's how we choose to exhibit our view on how flexible the platform is. So Those APIs are taken by the ecosystem partners. They're implemented in devices. They're extended. They're developed. App developers can build on top of those APIs. We expect that these will be used in ways that we just don't envision even ourselves. But by providing them all within that foundational set platform capability and within Android, and you will know that those capabilities exist across all Android devices, we believe that that transformation can be achieved. So we will always be investing and bringing more and more into that foundation. That foundation isn't just set once and then we leave it. We're always building, we're always innovating, from Lollipop into Marshmallow into future releases of Android, from operator to operator and OEM to OEM, device manufacturers. All of these things will provide great innovations on top of that foundation that's laid by Android for Work. Well, you, the customers, and our ecosystem partners can have the confidence that Google is managing and providing those capabilities across all Android devices. Impact. Now, this is a tremendously important part of the program. We believe that the time is now, as I said, for really strong transformational impact at every organization. And 10 years ago, we did have in the workplace, or we were starting to see, mobile email, mobile calendar, mobile contacts. That's because that's one of the very first things that someone's going to ask for. They're going to say, I want my information, the things I use almost every moment of every workday, with me at all times. Of course we're going to say that. Of course we continue to say that. This is an incredibly important part of mobility, is having that information that's yours, that personal information, right by you. However, it's now time to move beyond that, to grow. I and we consider that to be fundamentally foundational. We should expect that to be there. We should expect that to be solved in a secure and manageable way. And with Android for Work, it is. So on top of that, we are now working with the app developer ecosystem, with institutional developers to say, well, what's that next step? What is that next generation of capabilities that will excite employees to say, wow, this has really changed the way I work. I can do so much more now that I have mobility. So personal information will always be there, email will always be there, but what's that next generation of applications? And Android for Work is a platform that always provides more APIs, more ways to have security and embed that within the platform so that the developers can spend more time thinking about that next revolutionary workplace transformation, and less time having to worry about, well, how do I secure this and how do I manage this and all those things, because we're going to take care of those within the foundation. So impact and foundation are very tightly brought together. And when we're thinking about that, again, set that bar really high. We want to think about 100% of the workflows, 100% of the employees. Sometimes we talk to customers who say, well, you know, I've been mobilizing these employees for a while, and these are the folks I want to push forward into the next generation of mobility. And we think that we should be thinking about those folks, but also all the employees and workflows that are not yet mobilized. Those are situations where we can develop apps, develop devices, develop the right tools to make sure that those workflows are also brought into the next generation workplace. We want to think about and capture in our mind's eye what that workplace looks like, how it feels, how every day feels when we work there. I think most of us can actually do that in our imaginations and begin today to move forward towards that workplace. And we want to make sure that mobility transcends everything. We want to go beyond mobile first. Mobile first implies that there's a second and a third. And what actually mobile only is what we think the world is moving towards. And what that means is that mobility transcends everything, just in the way that 10 years ago, a lot of companies had an internet department, or they had a specific internet strategy. And nowadays, most companies don't feel that way. The internet just is part of what they do. And every product and service they deploy uses more connectivity, more networking, more interaction, right? Not less. And it's just woven in to the fabric of what we do now. And that's mobility as well. Mobility is just the next generation of that. Yes, today we have and need mobile specialists and mobile versions of applications, but very soon, mobility will just be woven into every single thing we do, just as it's woven into our personal lives today. And the workplace will be like that as well. So it's not just having a mobile-first workplace, it is just having that mobility be permeating everything that's happening. And that is how transformation happens. When you just know it's there, know it's secure, and know it's manageable and controlled, then great things happen. And that's what we're going for with the Android for Work program. Choice is also fundamentally important because how we achieve that impact is tremendously important because it sort of controls the scope of what we can do. We believe in using the right tool for the right job. And within Android, we have many, many different kinds of tools, fortunately, that can do many, many different kinds of jobs. And we encourage everyone to try and use them as broadly and, as I said, in ways that even we could not envision. But we do also even believe that multiple platforms will be needed. To get to that 100% mobilization, to transform the workplace, things beyond Android will be needed as well. And multiple platforms makes total sense for most organizations. So while we do believe that Android has a tremendous number of capabilities, a lot of choice, we do encourage everyone to have a multi-platform view. And by doing this, by combining different platforms, but also different form factors, different levels of ruggedization, different price points, we can target different markets, we can create markets, we can hugely expand markets, we can lower prices, we can affect that top and bottom line and all of our stock prices. All of these things can happen by combining mobility and transforming businesses and then the world. When we look at the emerging markets, and when we look at places where a lot of new business will occur in the next decade, mobility is front and center for payments. It's front and center for how business happens on a day-to-day basis. So what does that mean from a Google perspective? Android is one of the few platforms, and we're very proud of this, that covers a wide range of device form factors, a wide range of capabilities and price points. Google is one of the few places you can come and have every device come ranging from a watch and a wearable, up through a phone and a phablet, through the convertible and laptop form factors and tablets, through just signs in workplaces, televisions, billboards. Android runs on all of these form factors. We often say that what we do with Android for Work is simply provide secure, manageable, glowing rectangles. Doesn't matter how big that glowing rectangle is, you just need to decide what that right size is, and we can take care of it for you. So when you think about that, that's really powerful. We need to think beyond just the phone. It's easy to say, well, the phone, mobility, those are the same thing. They're not just the same thing. The phone is a really important device. It travels with you everywhere you go, but it is hardly the only glowing rectangle that you interact with on a daily basis. Think about every glowing rectangle that you use. Every single part of one of those devices should be part of a holistic mobility strategy. And we, with Android, can help you do that. Because with Android for Work, if you remember what I said about platform, the platform runs underneath all of these different form factors. So when you think about, hey, you know what, I want to make that television manageable. When you think, hey, I could replace that paper sign with a digital sign. When you think about, oh, you know what, I want a dedicated device sitting somewhere that will actually just do one job. All of those things can be done today with Android with the same underlying management fabric and the same underlying security system and methodologies. And you'll hear a lot about those coming up. So why are we doing all of these things? Again, transformation is key to what we want. We want to allow people to standardize and have a common platform across all their Android units. They will have a lot of choice coming from us. And we are continuing to invest from a Google standpoint in that platform and invest in the ecosystem, because our partners and their innovations that layer on top of what we provide here at Google is critically important. And we will keep building more into the platform, and they will keep building more into their add-on capabilities. And between those two things, we truly believe that customer transformation is imminent, that you will be able to transform your organizations. And then that will feed back into our investments, and we will have an amazing platform on which to go forward. So we're very excited about that. I'm very excited about what we're sharing with all of you today. Thank you so much once again for watching. And Sebastian, please come on up and let's get things going.
Thanks, Andrew. Great kickoff.
Thank you.
And we'll talk to Andrew a little bit later during the fireside Q&A. So Android has been configured and optimized for the enterprise. But how does it evolve the classic managed devices scenario? From personal phones to company-issued tablets, Android provides IT with simple solutions to manage and secure company data on virtually any device. To share more, I'd like to introduce Android Product Manager Lilian Zia. Lilian? Come on up. Hey, welcome.
Hi, thank you.
Good to have you here.
Thank you. Thank
Welcome
you for
on
having
stage.
me.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So we heard Andrew kind of give, the macro vision statement. But as I wear the enterprise hat, and since this is a for work event, help us understand how Android relates to the enterprise. So namely, what does Android for Work actually do?
So Android for Work is actually a program that's designed to make Android devices enterprise ready. There are 3 essential elements in the program. The first one is built-in capabilities we introduced and we continue to add into the Android open source project to manage the workspace for users' own devices in a bring your own device use case or the entire device for corporate-owned devices. A second key element in the program is application management using Google Play for Work. And finally, a very essential part of the program is the ecosystem of partners, growing that ecosystem and making it a thriving ecosystem of partners for work.
When we talk to CIOs and COOs and they express their need for a mobility strategy, one of the things that always comes up is really Android plus security, right? And so how does security fit into the Android for Work narrative?
So you're indeed correct, Sebastian. Our enterprise customers take security very seriously. And the good news is Android for Work security is fundamentally built on Android security, which is the Android operating system security, as well as the Google services built on top, which when both combined help to protect and make the Android user secure. But we will learn a lot more about that in the next session from Adrian as he talks about Android security. But more specifically, within Android for Work, we built a very strong separation between the user's personal data and work. And we call that a work profile. So work profile is managed separately and independently by the enterprise, and their management is only scoped to that profile. There are also security policies and configurations that we have introduced since the initial launch of Android for Work in Lollipop, but we also enhanced the Marshmallow with finer grain control of these policies and configurations. A good example would be an IT administrator trying to control remotely what an application set of features are enabled or disabled, what settings are enabled or disabled, as well as in-app credentials. Google Chrome uses or leverages these policies and controls in an enterprise as an example of an enterprise managed application.
Got it. Separation of data, as you mentioned, is huge, right? Specifically enterprise, it's a key requirement. Especially in the context of BYOD, a lot of enterprises look to take individual applications and distribute them in a safe and secure manner, right? They're essentially asking for a business version of the consumer Google Play Store. Does that exist? And how does kind of Google Play fit into the Android for Work story?
Indeed, it exists, Sebastian. So you've hit on a very crucial point there. Users are expecting to pick and choose what their enterprise, of course, have allowed them to in a variety of applications. And just as you have a variety of applications for the consumer store, you would expect to have lots of applications without friction available to be deployed to the employees. And that's what Google Play for Work provides you. Imagine all the applications that are available in Google Play. The consumer store are also available for administrators to curate from, select from, and have them ready for work, which is a tremendous value that you get with Google Play for Work. So there are APIs that have been developed to allow enterprise mobility management vendors to be able to manage these applications. So an IT administrator could basically install or remove these applications remotely. There is also another point, which is we assume that enterprises want to mobilize their workforce. So they're building these applications in-house that are proprietary to their business, but also that allow their workforce to easily navigate that workforce, whether it's to book a conference room or find a conference room for that matter, or browse the lunch menu. So all these applications could also be deployed and be readily available for enterprises using Google Google Play for Work. So Google Play for Work has this feature to allow for private applications.
So the rapid rise in adoption of Android and the success of Android has really been a testament to its ecosystem, right? And Andrew kind of calls it a self-evolving, self-generating ecosystem of partners. Historically, Android has been very much dependent on partners. How do partners play into the Android for Work framework? Or let me rephrase it differently. How important are partners to the Android for Work story?
As Andrew touched upon in his keynote, but also as I alluded to in the in your first question, partners are a crucial part of the Android for Work program. We depend on them, and we have a diverse set of partners. So we work with device manufacturers and carriers to have our capabilities ready out of the box on all Android devices that you could purchase. We also work with the enterprise mobility management so that they are able to take advantage of these capabilities that we're building either in AOSP or in the Google Play for Work or in the other Google services to build their management solutions. There are also application developers who want to bring business value and build enterprise applications that can be managed and controlled. So there are lots of enterprise, if you will, ecosystem partners, some of which are very much to serve enterprise use cases, for example, VPN and or identity providers, just to name a few.
It's great to see that Android has become virtually a platform where all these stakeholders come together and really dynamically create these really cool solutions for the enterprise. And I actually believe we have a video showcasing that.
Yes, indeed. Yes. So to show us what we've been talking about and to demonstrate the Android for Work capabilities, we have one of our customers. Let's take a look at Guardian Life Insurance and how they have used Android to mobilize their workforce.
Perfect. Let's take a look.
When you think about it, companies don't get to be around for 155 years without being innovative. Guardian has 7,000 employees that are full-time employees, and then we have another population which are field. When we looked at a lot of the opportunities that came through, this digital revolution that's happening, we looked at, the productivity that people are having in their personal life, so at play. And we wanted to make sure that we were allowing people to be able to take advantage of that at work. Android for Work has really helped us to realize, that dream that we wanted to do BYOD. Before Android for Work, we really limited the experience. You could have the phone, it was on our network, you could do very limited functionality, but it was awkward and it was very difficult for people to use. And it was something that we heard about often, and people didn't like the experience and they wanted something better. The challenge as an enterprise is how do you offer that type of experience while also being secure. The capability that we have for Android for Work now allows us to do that in an extremely secure way, that the information and the applications used to access that information is controlled and governed by our security team, just like as if you were internally on our network and on one of our machines. We are able to separate the experience at the device level so that you can have all of your work applications, all of your work email and data in a separate part of that phone than your personal. So instead of switching between multiple devices or potentially not having the information that they need to close the deal, they have everything on one device, and it makes for the most seamless and best customer experience possible. The Android platform creates a lot of opportunity, I think, around the productivity tools. In addition to that, we also have an opportunity to deploy applications and do that in a very seamless fashion. It's controlled by Guardian, the use is controlled by Guardian, and then obviously you access our data through those applications. So anywhere from managing my personal productivity to collaborating with others to doing something that's a direct interaction with a client and helping them get through the sales process or solve a particular service issue. Having people being more productive in how they do their jobs, that's success. Having clients have better experiences when they're interacting with people from Guardian. that success? What are all the great opportunities and things that haven't been done yet that we can do for another 155 years? Partnering with companies like Google on things like Android for Work are going to make that a reality.
Well, again, it's great to see how customers like RDN Life are using our technology to not only mobilize the workforce, but at the end of the day, actually streamline their operations, right? To Andrew's point, really to make impact or to have impact, right? So thank you to your team to taking the feedback from our customers and really keeping up the good work to making this essentially possible.
Thank you, Sebastian, for this chat. But also, we're very excited at the Android for Work team for the product that we're providing and the features and the capabilities that we built and that we continue to evolve. We look forward to our customers' feedback and input and our end users because we want to make Android for Work the best product ever for work. So I want to hear from you.
And I'm sure they would be happy to give that feedback. Lilian, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks.
So we've seen how the Android mobility solution creates great experiences for both users and IT. But what about security? To share how Android for Work protects the user while providing IT with best-in-class security, I'd like to introduce the global technical lead for Android security, Adrian Ludwig. Adrian, come on up.
Thanks, Sebastian.
Great.
Good to see you.
Good to have you. Welcome on stage. Really excited about this discussion, namely because everyone is so focused on security. So let me ask you one thing about operating systems. When we talk about operating systems, people traditionally think about it as kind of a stack of multiple systems, and operating systems have been around for pretty much 30 to 40 years, right? With Android, you've essentially created an OS from the bottom up as if we were to imagine it today. Explain that.
Yeah, so if you go back 10 years ago, when we were first starting to think about what security should look like for a mobile device, we realized that there was a lot that we could learn by going back 30, 40 years, right? From the very beginning, take the lessons learned from every previous operating system and put it into a small form factor and really make it effective. So we did things like realized from the very beginning that what people interact with are applications, and that isolating those applications from one another was really important. And that was the beginning of the sandbox for those applications. It was something we'd learned on the web, and something that really is about how you protect user data. The sandbox has evolved. We've introduced things like exploit mitigation to make sure that attempts to get out of the sandbox aren't likely to be effective. We've reinforced the sandbox by introducing some technology that was originally built in the US government called SE Linux to really add strength to it. But all of that was around orienting security around applications and how users interact with the device. The other thing that we did was we looked at the very bottom, right? We said the foundation of the sandbox is only as strong as the bottom, right? The hardware, the integrity promises that come from the hardware. And there are a lot of really good innovation in hardware that was never made available to applications. And so we've been doing a lot to bind the application sandbox through integrity checks, through encryption, into the actual hardware that's on the device. Things like Trust Zone if you're on an ARM chip, an ARM processor. So we're trying to make that into a really sort of compact, very tight package around application security that goes all the way down to hardware.
Got it. So, and that's a great segue. So you talk about kind of, you take a layered approach to Android OS. Are there you take a layered approach to Android OS? Are there any additional Google layers or services that would add an additional, layer of protection?
Yeah, I mean, I think people in the security space talk about like the most secure box is one that's just not turned on and not connected to anything, right? But we knew that phones were going to be connected and tablets were going to be connected, and eventually there'd be lots of them. And we also knew by looking at Windows and other operating systems that they had built up this ecosystem of services, right? Now, those earlier ecosystems were pay to play, right? If you wanted to have antivirus, you had to pay for it. If you wanted to have intrusion detection, you had to find a vendor and pay for it. Forensics, the same sort of thing. So when we were thinking about Android, we said, people don't want to pay for that, right? And it's certainly not the case that everybody wants to pay for it. And so we took those same capabilities, antivirus, intrusion detection, forensics, and bound them into the applications that we make available from Google. So Google Play Services has those capabilities baked in and broadly distributed, which gives us the ability to be very, very responsive, much more responsive even than an update to the operating system, because we're able to see attempts at exploitation, react to them, gather information on them, and really shape the ecosystem and shape the operating system based on what's happening in the real world, as opposed to what we think is going to happen when we're building a specific feature and putting it into a device.
Gotcha. One of the things that we hear from CIOs and COOs is they like Android because the user acquisition cost is very low, and thus, it's easy to kind of get onto that platform. Tying that to your service comment, I would imagine that would give a lot of information, and you can react very quickly to threats. So it accumulates in a lot of data, correct?
Yeah, and we've been looking at that data, and one of the most important things that the data does is identifies potential problems, right? So a good example, not too long ago, we started to focus on specific threats related to malware in Russia. We were able to really hone our attention there, see what types of exploitation were going on, and then react to that very, very effectively. And we're doing that, from place to place to place throughout the entire sort of global ecosystem. But the other thing that it made us do is realize there's this concept within Android that we think a lot about, right, which is openness and having lots of different information available. Day to day, you or I may not look at Russia and say, we're going to focus on that. We're sort of looking at the entire world. But there are specific companies or specific people who are looking at a particular problem and trying to make it better. And that's one of the things that the openness of Android lets the ecosystem do, right? If a company that's really good at forensics sees that there's a gap, they can work on a feature there. If there's an OEM that says, I really think it's important that we have innovation and security in the lock screen and the way that the pin is laid out, that innovation can happen. And so the openness that sort of was at the foundation of Android is really important for encouraging innovation to take place. The other thing it does, I think, is also pretty subtle, is it shifts from a just trust me, just trust Google, just trust Android, into more of a model that's trust and verify. Because anybody who wants to can improve the system, right? They can add new code in open source, they can file bugs. We've actually built up programs to try to encourage that kind of an interaction. Because it's not a closed system, it's not a closed solution, it's one that anybody can see a gap and try to make improvements.
It's funny, we keep coming back to this concept of an ecosystem, right? Andrew mentioned it, Lillian mentioned it. I mean, ecosystem essentially, it's a term for biology, right? And it's something that inherently grows, and it grows organically. It grows through openness, right? You mentioned openness. Doesn't openness also mean lack of control?
To some extent it does. And there are some areas where control is something that's really, really important. A good example that we've heard a lot about is around updates. And how are you going to update across an ecosystem when you have lots of different OEMs? Because most people are used to a single provider providing every bit of availability for the device and all of the updates for the device. So that's an area that we've been investing in a lot right now. It requires coordination. It requires partners to interact with one another. We've got a commitment that's been made by Google to provide updates on a monthly basis to make sure that devices are receiving security updates. But the other thing that we did that I think was pretty subtle was emphasize that transparency and the ability for an enterprise to look at a device and understand its state is something that was missing. It was missing in Android, but it's also missing in all other operating systems and other platforms as well, right? We've had these opaque version strings, and the understanding of whether or not a particular issue affects a device that's in your fleet is one of the things that's a core challenge. So that's why just recently we introduced the idea of a version string that was based on a date. So it's easy for an enterprise to look at a device and say, that device is up to date, or it's out of date by 30 days, and have a sense for the level of risk that they're being exposed to. So that's the kind of innovation that you get when you have an open ecosystem, when you can look at a problem and anybody that's in the ecosystem can propose a solution, and that kind of change can get made. And that's what I think is really exciting about security in Android, is the chance to change how we think about security and make it a much better place.
Yeah, and I think if security has been a common thread through all these sessions, and I think we'll continue on when we talk to CIOs and COOs. The first thing that comes up is security, and what kind of what's the answer. So, you know, to echo what all our customers say and the ones that are watching right now, you know, thank you for the time and the effort you put into that, and thank you for the quick responses that you are sending out to the field to say, you know what, we're on top of this and we are actively engaging with the problem. So, thank you very much. Is there anything else you would like while I have you on stage?
No, I think you know, thanks for the questions, and I think ultimately. That's what makes us stronger, right? Is people asking questions, identifying where the gaps are, and really pushing us to do a better job. So we do that every day, and we'll hope to do it into the future.
Adrian, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it. Thanks a lot. So before we move on to our next topic, let's take a look at how another company is changing the way they do business using mobile devices to enable their workers no matter where they are.
So Safelight's been around since 1947. You know, our focus is always on installing and repairing auto glass. You know, we do it mostly on the road. That means that, you know, mobility is within, you know, the core of our business model. So to move forward away from kind of a rigid paper-based solution, we developed a mobile application that our technicians were going to use day in, day out to clock in, clock out, to status their jobs, to accept payment, fill orders. When we went with the Samsung Note 2 on the Android platform, our appreciation from technicians went from about a 5 or a 6 out of 10 to a 9. They took it up, and within a day, they were functional on it. We serve 5 million customers a year. So communication at Safelite is absolutely key when it comes to satisfying customers, whether it's talking with us when you're scheduling the order, getting email updates about the information included in your order, text messages when we're on the way to the job. There's nothing that is really more important and that helps to set the expectations better than a strong communication stream. Anything that we could build into this functionality to make it easy for techs to use was important. And the very flexible framework that Android gave us allowed us to get this down to one click. And literally it's one click. One of the great things about having a homegrown application, you know, supported here at Safelite is that we can do whatever we want within the application, whatever our vision is, and we can do it at the time frame that we would want as well. Since they're using a Note 2, it's basically a consumer device being used for an enterprise purpose. And through the Knox APIs from Samsung, we're able to apply a strong level of security without locking the thing down to where it's no longer a smartphone. As we're such a large company and we have so many techs doing this all day long, we immediately have a lot of great data to work with when it comes to understanding drive time, when it comes to understanding how long certain parts are going to take to install, which we can then use to schedule smarter, which helps when it comes to customer expectations. A piece of training that our entire fleet of 6,000 techs needs tomorrow, we can get that to them tomorrow. The flexibility of being able to use this one app as a window for everything else they need is extremely powerful. It's had such a great response, both from techs and from customers, that we know that in 2016, 2017, we're going to see even more leveraging of this kind of communication, because it's really the standard now. It's what customers expect.
And we're back. It's great to see customers like Safelite work with devices partners like Samsung to bring mobility solutions to the market. Our sessions so far have shown how security and mobility form the foundation of Android for Work. We've talked about the great user experience for both employees and IT, but what are the practical applications that make Android the best choice for business? To discuss the diversity of choices that enable Android to offer a device for every need, I'd like to introduce Android Product Manager Nadim Tawali. Nadim, come on up.
Hey,
Welcome on stage.
how are you doing?
Good. Great to have you.
Thanks. Good to be here.
So we've talked so much about the word ecosystem, and I'm going to recycle it yet once again because it's such a big part of our narrative. Help me understand how the diversity and the richness of the ecosystem plays into the success of our choice when it comes to devices.
Sure. It's a pretty important component. So really, when you talk about the ecosystem, Android is built on a great ecosystem of many, many partners. And one of the fundamental categories in that partnership is the device manufacturers, of course. Today, we are at a point where we have hundreds of device manufacturers building their hardware for Android. We have thousands of different Android device models that are out there in the market. So what this does to Android for Work, to answer your question, is it has the same kind of impact that it does to Android in general in the consumer space, which is it brings choice, it brings diversity. So as a company, I have a lot of devices to effectively choose from. We heard Andrew earlier say that there is no one tool for the job when it comes to enterprise mobility or work mobility in general. So diversity and choice are very important for a company.
Yeah, and so let me reiterate that, right?
Yeah.
So choice is important for the enterprise because you essentially within an organization have a multitude of different endpoints catering to very different needs,
That's
right?
That's right.
Explain again how that diversity is a great thing to have if you look at it from the enterprise lens.
Yeah, absolutely. We can talk about some of the different use cases that are made possible by the diversity. So there's a lot of properties where devices can be different. If we look at the traditional use cases for mobility, obviously we look at form factor first. So Android has smartphones, Android has tablets, Android has phablets. On the tablet side, you can get a tablet that is maybe a 7-inch tablet. You can get an 8, 9, 11, 12, 13, 14, all the way up to Android running on TVs, right? Android running on TVs obviously has very cool entertainment value with Android TV. But also on the work side, we see Android being used in that form factor for things like digital signage, for like a billboard situation where I'm setting up a kiosk and I do want my content to be visible on basically such a large screen. So that's one property in general, the form factor. We do see so some of the other cool things are device manufacturers will, for example, do hardware that is waterproof, right? Waterproof, ruggedized, durable devices. And you can imagine here, Sebastian, the use cases being somebody in a factory, like a factory worker, in an environment that is not the typical office environment that we know, wanting to use something that is durable or something that is waterproof. And that same device, for example, could have a built-in barcode scanner, right? That caters to the specific task that this worker is performing in the factory. So those are some of the examples of how the devices are different externally, or like form factor type of differences. When we look at the devices internally, the devices could vary from a component perspective as well. So we see some devices have NFC, for example. Some devices support dual SIMs, and we've seen the dual SIM come up again in some countries like India, where it is an important part of business to have a device that supports multiple SIMs or multiple operators for the sake of roaming and things like that. I've seen devices that have a built-in TV tuner, right, where you can actually watch over-the-air TV on your device. So maybe not the best illustration of a business use case, but I just mentioned it as an example of what is going on in the ecosystem and what the partners are doing to the Android devices and effectively taking Android in all sorts of different directions in terms of creating that wealth of device choice.
Well, that's great because, it kind of echoes what Andrew said, right? We're here to power virtually any screen.
Exactly.
Right?
So this makes it such that there is a tool for every job, just to go back to what Andrew was saying. Yeah.
So we're kind of in the glowing rectangle space,
Yes.
right? And we want Android to be the underlying kind of framework that powers that screen. But if we go behind the corporate firewall, you mentioned billboards, which is a very intuitive case. But if you go behind the corporate firewall, again, there are very stringent security requirements and components that need to be met, right? So talk to me a little bit about the security plus hardware story. Adrian alluded to it a little bit, but give me your take.
Sure. I didn't bring up security earlier, but it's definitely one of the device properties that could be different. Where we do see a lot of diversity as well. In general, though, it's important to note that. So we heard Adrian earlier, like you said, talk about security. Everything that is in Android, everything that is Android security, what's in the platform, is available on all devices across basically all of the devices, right? So everything that Adrian's team does is available on Android in general. That said, we do see a category of partners that do innovate on top of security. And from an Android perspective, we love that. We love basically partners coming in and adding their own innovation on top of any particular area. So on the security side, we see partners like, for example, BlackBerry. BlackBerry has been a name associated with enterprise and security for some time. They are now building devices that run Android. Another example is the Black Phone that is made by Silent Circle. Those partners will typically put their own, they will add hardware capabilities on their devices and also add new software or applications that are working hand in hand to complement the security of Android and basically add new features that customers might want.
Yeah, and again, the beauty of this is we're coming back to the ecosystem.
Yes, always.
You know, what I like about kind of your story and what I like about kind of the greater story is that we essentially put in place the common denominator for the ecosystem then to build on.
That's right.
And I think that's really the value that the customers see, right? Again, because the customer knows best what that device needs to look like in its niche use case, right? And so, so it's glad to see that, you know, your specific examples that where it all comes together, right? Yep. I guess lastly, from my perspective is, you know, if we tie that back to Android for Work, we have a huge array and portfolio of devices across a multitude of different OEMs.
Yep.
Regardless of what OEM, do they all have access to, I guess, the program that is called Android for Work, for the functionalities that are embedded within that program?
Yeah, so that's a very important point because I think we talk about diversity and, you know, there's a lot of devices that look very different and, you know, seemingly could perform different functions. As far as Android is concerned, and Android for Work specifically, it was one of the principles or one of the goals of Android for Work to have basically all of that applicable across Android or on Android in general across all of the devices. So again, going back to what Adrian was saying, everything that is Android security is available across all devices. We also heard from Lillian earlier on the foundation of Android for Work and basically what is going into Android to create Android for Work. So the platform capabilities, the Android APIs, even things like Play for Work, all of that is available across all devices, right? And what this does to a customer, what this does to a business, they can go select the best device that meets their specific use case. And they can do that knowing that all of those devices, everything that is Android, is manageable in the same consistent, reliable, and secure manner.
And it, I mean, it ultimately fundamentally changes how that customer deploys technology.
Absolutely,
right?
yeah. And you know, when they're choosing a device, it doesn't have to be one device
right.
that is the answer for a customer, right? So a customer might want to use one device for a certain category of employees, but then use a different device for another category of employees, or even use a different device for employees in a different country or a different region, depending on their specific requirements.
And with all customers, I feel like the story is very much use case driven, mm-hmm. right? They have one particular use case, they need to find a solution that, and to your point, it needs to be a scalable solution,
yes.
right? And I
Absolutely.
think with this programmatic approach of Android and Android for Work, we're really meeting that benchmark. Mm-hmm. So yeah, great example of how this is really coming into action. Nadeem, I want to really thank you for being here. Very excited about this space. Again, a lot of customers are asking, what's that form factor of the future look like? I know you're kind of in the midst of it, so
all of them.
All of them. So super excited, and yeah, I want to just thank you for your time.
Glad to be here. Thank you, Sebastian.
Thanks a lot. Now that we've learned about the range of devices that exist, why don't we bring Andrew back up here to share more on the variety of things we can accomplish now and in the future. Andrew, come on up.
Hey.
Good to see you.
Nice seeing you.
Welcome back on stage.
Thanks so much.
So I have the privilege to intro you and then have you wrap up the session. So I have a couple of visionary questions for you that I need your insight on.
Sure.
So you've kicked it off with kind of this narrative of kind of the transformation of everything and how Android really helps businesses revolutionize the way that they deploy technology. Mm-hmm. If you look at the workspace today, give me some examples of trends that really, really excite you.
Definitely. So Everything's really exciting, but in particular, I'm really thrilled about the possibilities of what we call corporate-owned single-use devices. And these are devices which they're not general purpose, they're not necessarily running in a BYOD scenario. We heard about how Android has great support for work and personal life split. We have that. But in this Kosu scenario, new in Marshmallow, we're able to focus down and say, what if you had a dedicated hardware platform for the application functionality that you wanted to deploy? And so this is a case where you get an app and you're able to control the entire life cycle of the device and say, from the very beginning, all the way through when that device is decommissioned, it has a purpose. And its purpose is to be a workplace device. It may run one app, it may run a series of apps, but those applications are dedicated towards a workplace. These used to be called kiosks. They could have been in an airport, they could have been in a hotel, they could have been in a restaurant. But we've actually taken that model and said, hey, we think that these devices could be used anywhere. So in Lollipop, we really focused on the general case. In Marshmallow, we've really focused now on saying, hey, for these Kosu use cases, we think almost every business has them. How can we make it really easy to deploy them and to maintain them with Android?
Yeah, I think that's exactly what we're hearing in the field, right? This need to standardize on OS, have a almost a minimum viable framework to standardize on that, and then basically light up every single screen, whether that's your mass screen or whether that's your niche screen, right? So absolutely understand that narrative. If you look at it from an Android perspective, obviously every single endpoint has different requirements, right? Talk to me a little bit about the features or functionalities that are actually built into Android to then cater to very specific single use cases.
Definitely. So as I said, in Lollipop, we did focus, just as you said, on the general case, those general purpose devices we all carry, like the tablets and the phones, making sure we assume that there would be work and personal data mixed, living on the same device, and then we separated them from a security and management perspective. In Marshmallow, we now have features to target exactly the Kosu case, where you can say, you know what, there isn't going to be personal data on the device. I want to claim the device from the very beginning to make it really easy for someone to just pull that out of a box and set it up and run it. We have features to say, hey, I want Play to deploy this application, but I want it to be seamless in the background so that it always looks like it's running that app on the very front, and you don't really get that feel of apps updating, etc. We have the capability to control how firmware upgrades are actually deployed, so that you as an IT administrator won't have your device updating itself right in the middle of the workday. You can say, well, maybe I want those to update at a certain time during the night. We're able to control all those things so that these devices can get on with what they're meant to do, which is serving the workplace. Businesses can get on with what they want to do, which is provide that great capability on top of the platform. So, for example, we have a company who used to provide a dashboard just as software. They're a dashboard company, and all of their customers would have that dashboard running on a laptop or maybe running on a tablet somewhere. And now those customers are also able to order and say, I want the dashboard, but I want it on a television. And what will happen is they'll actually receive a television, they pull it out of the box, they put it on the wall, they plug it in, and it just shows the dashboard. It just sets itself up, runs, it knows what app to run. That's all they have to do. So by pairing hardware and application functionality, it can be a really powerful solution.
Right. And again, that's kind of how you entered the stage today, by saying, we're actually in this business of powering glowing rectangles. Right?
Definitely.
So we want to become device agnostic as long as we are kind of the underlying OS. One common theme throughout all these sessions was, again, this almost recycled word concept of an ecosystem, right? And Android has been successful because of its ecosystem of partners. Innovation has happened because all stakeholders came together on the platform and basically created something really, really cool. CIOs and COOs tend to almost lose track of the pace of innovation that is arguably fostered by Android. So if you kind of wear your PM hat right now and speak to the audience of the enterprise, what are a few macro or micro trends that you're really, really, really excited about that are coming up or that are in the not too distant future.
Definitely, and I think that what I just talked about with Kosu leads us straight into, IoT, or the Internet of Things, where everything around us is going to be connected, talking, exchanging information to make us more efficient and basically connect the world. So what I like to say is we do glowing rectangles. Android is doing the part of IoT, the part of Internet of Things that has a screen. Right? So all these glowing rectangles, they're all connected. And I think that whenever we walk into a workplace, what you can see for the future is, what if everything in that business, every glowing rectangle, every television, every giant screen in Times Square, every phone, every tablet, every laptop, what if they were all connected, running that same management platform, all centrally controllable? What could we accomplish, and how much better would that business be if that was what was happening? And that's really what I'm really excited about. That's where I think it's going to be a really imminent stage of transformation. And we actually have a customer who's doing this, Peninsula Hotels in Hong Kong, and we actually have a video showing what they're doing.
Let's take a look at the video.
Peninsula Hotels is a worldwide global hotel chain. We do have 10 hotels around the world, and we focus really on the high-end luxury hotels across the world. Up until now, we've really have been using technology to increase the guest user experience. The next generation of technology was really on the touchscreen. So we started to look at the wall panels being touchscreen, as well as what we call our bedside panel, which is our tablets that we deployed. The guests can actually literally pick it up and walk around in the room with the tablet and control the lighting, we can control the air conditioning, the curtains. We can ask for valet service, housekeeping, watch movies. We can actually listen to the radio. It's a push of a button and they're able to get the service that they need. It's a very simple task to the guests, but then the complexity that goes behind it, the guests will never know. And we're able to do that because we've chosen Android. Because it's open source, it gives us the more flexibility to change things around, to modify it so that it actually fits that functionality for what we need to use it for. It can be as complicated or it can be very simple as what we wanted it to be. The primary reason why we chose Android was the fact that we were able to use all these open source items. We were able to even connect with other programmers to say, hey, how do you guys use it? All the tablets that we've deployed in Hong Kong, Paris, Chicago, and Beverly Hills, we have SOTI MobiControl deployed in every one of the tablets. And we use that to deploy our applications to monitor the health of the tablets. A lot of times, when the guest goes into the room and things aren't working, we literally have to receive the complaint in order to understand, okay, something's not working inside the guest room. But running on tablets, we're able to know now, even before the guest starts complaining about it, and we're able to make changes on the fly. So therefore, we're always keeping ahead of the competition, keeping in line with what guests experience or what guests would like to see. And because we've done all the applications in-house, this makes it even easier. Peninsula is all about luxury, it's about simplicity as well. Android is definitely a flexible tool for us to go above and beyond what our guest requires and above and beyond what we would like our technology and devices to become.
It's exciting to see the enthusiasm with these customers that are essentially taking our products and almost iterating it to make it useful for themselves, right? I think one thing that you highlighted and that kept coming up is like, if you really standardize on this fairly seamless OS, it fundamentally changes the way you deploy technology. It fundamentally changes the way you actually light up these screens, right? It's no longer siloed, it's completely central, right? So that's really, really exciting. I can't thank you enough for being here, for working on the product on behalf of our enterprise customers and our prospects. We're very, very excited for the future. Thanks again, Andrew, for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you. Thanks, Sebastian.
Thanks a lot. So, Andrew, Lillian, Adrian, and Deem have shown us that Android for Work is a comprehensive mobility platform custom-built for today's enterprise. We now see how the Android ecosystem delivers an extensive variety of devices catering to use cases that help companies work better with great user experiences. We believe there are opportunities for today's businesses to do things with mobility that aren't being done yet. And not because they can't be done, but because we haven't all come together to raise the bar on how we use mobility at the enterprise level. Thinking beyond mail, calendar, and contacts Android for Work delivers the tools and applications that can help today's companies create new ways to leverage mobility and drive business forward. For additional resources on Android for Work, including management, security, applications, and more, please head over to google.com/work/android/live. From all of us on the Android for Work team, thanks for watching.